The half that was on top cared little for the struggles and less for the fate of those who were underneath, so long as it was able to hold them there and keep its own seat. There came a time when the discomfort and crowding below were so great and the consequent upheavals so violent that it was no longer an easy thing to do, and then the upper half fell to inquiring what was the matter. That is not a socialist pamphlet. That's not a strike speech. That is Jacob Riis, writing in the 1890s, describing the richest industrial nation on earth and the poorest living conditions many Americans had ever known.
Well, we're really picking up where we left off last week, right? That this idea that industrial supremacy did work, and the factories ran, the steel poured, and the railroads stretched from coast to coast.
Right, but we have to kind of remember that there's this lingering question. With industrialization, who's really benefiting from it? Who's industrialization working for? Because as cities explode, there's all this upward and outward expansion. Millions of workers are going to find that, progress doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like an ever-increasing pressure.
Right. And so we're going to dedicate this episode talking about that pressure. The pressure on workers inside industrial capitalism. The pressure on cities growing faster than anyone could manage. And the pressure on American democracy when power concentrates in corporations and city machines, and sometimes in the federal government itself.
This is the Gilded Age.
Woohoo.
Off the brochure, not just tycoons and skylines, but strikes and slums and immigrants and reformers and people trying to survive inside systems that, unfortunately, they didn't control.
All right, I think a good place to start is the factory floor because for many Americans, industrial capitalism meant being on the floor for a long time. You had super long working hours, pretty low wages, things were pretty dangerous, and there's not really any sense of security in terms of holding on to that job. You never knew what was going to happen.
Never knew.
I feel badly complaining sometimes about how long we have to work, but back then, if you worked in industries like this, you were 12-hour days, 6 days a week.
Yeah.
No,
and you could have been 9 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, no workers' compensation. So if you get hurt on the job, there's nothing, to be done about that. No minimum wage, no safety regulations. If you got hurt, you were done.
Yeah, if you got hurt, you were just easily replaced, and you didn't know if you'd ever find a job again.
Exactly. And so it wasn't an accident. This was all very intentional. Industrial capitalism rewarded efficiency, not stability. Employers could replace workers pretty easily, especially as immigration surged.
And that takes us back to this key tension, this pressure that we were speaking of in the intro. Workers are definitely essential to production, but individually you can dispose of them as you saw fit. And this imbalance shapes everything that's going to follow.
And one of the earliest expressions of that tension shows up in the coal fields of Pennsylvania with a group known as the Molly Maguires.
Aye, the Molly Maguires. Mostly Irish. That was horrible. That was a horrible book.
I actually thought that was pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. You guys are nice. Mostly Irish immigrant miners. This is who we were talking about. Operating in secret, sometimes violently. They would engage in sabotage, threats, retaliation against their mine bosses.
And what really matters historically isn't whether every accusation against them were true. There was a lot of salacious details about their behavior, but
salacious.
Yeah, it's what the fact that they existed. It's what that tells us, right? Workers felt desperate, and when people feel desperate, they go to kind of desperate means to solve their situation. And employers responded by criminalizing that resistance and kind of accusing the Molly Maguires of being this violent, radical terrorist group.
Yeah, and the message becomes really clear that labor protest could be treated as a crime, not as a negotiation between an employer and an employee, but something that was inherently wrong and the fault of workers.
Then they got executed.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yikes.
I just want to back up for a second, and because I like the word salacious.
Yeah, it's a good word.
Should that be the word of the episode?
Hold on. And it has to have a certain patina of kind of
patina
to it.
Yeah.
Like salacious.
Oh, yeah. When you
the
say
S's.
it like that.
and salacious. That fear would push workers toward organizing. And the first truly national attempt will be 1867 with the Knights of Labor.
And the Knights of Labor are really swinging for the fences here. They wanted everyone, the skilled and the unskilled, men, women, black, white. They argue that everyone should be a part of the fight against this exploitative wage system.
Everyone is invited to the Knights of Labor. I think that will make people remember the Knights of Labor. But that inclusiveness does become a bit of a weakness.
Oh, you're on fire.
I'm back.
Yeah,
I am
you are
back
on
with
fire.
the sound machine. The Knights of Labor, they're trying to organize everyone at once across all skill levels, all industries, races, regions, inviting women as well. And they really never build a clear chain of command. And local chapters are going to act independently. Strikes break out without coordination. And leadership really struggles to control the message, because if you're going to be a labor union, you've really got to have a keen focus on what the group wants. And when things go wrong and there's no discipline, no unified strategy, there's no way to distance your organization from that violence or radicalism or chaos that you're already being accused of. So in a system that's already stacked against labor, that lack of focus that the Knights of Labor had really is going to prove it to be very costly.
Yeah, and if you any political organization, labor or whatever, if you do not have a unified message that is delivered in an organized way.
Yeah, a simple message too, and you can't want it
Exactly.
all. You cannot want it all at once. It's got to be very focused.
Right. So I think a lot of people associate Knights of Labor as violent because of the strikes and kind of an unclear message, kind of all over the place. So if you contrast that with the AFL, the American Federation of Labor, this is led by Samuel Gompers. Every time I see that word, I was Gompers. Hey, I'm Mr. Gompers. I'm a former cigar
Hey, don't talk about him
maker."
like that.
I'm sorry. I'm Samuel Gompers. He's a former cigar maker who believed unions should be permanent, professional organizations rather than broad moral crusades. They're more concerned with what I will call bread and butter issues.
Yep.
And yeah, probably you could say more pragmatic. It's selective. They organize around skill, but they also condense their message to mostly include native-born white men, focusing on higher wages, shorter hours, and better working conditions. And they're not really set out to overthrow capitalism, but they're more trying to create a specialized space within it.
So here's your compare and contrast moment. The Knights of Labor, they are trying to imagine a moral reordering of society, at least in theory, welcoming women and black workers into that vision. But the AFL, they're really going to narrow the fight, and they're going to prioritize workers with leverage, even if that means having to leave lots of people out of their vision.
Yeah, and Dr. Garrison, you nailed it with the word pragmatic, I think, with the AFL. And that's always the trade-off. The narrower vision proves more durable. It's going to have more staying power, but also more exclusionary. It wins incremental gains for some workers while reinforcing racial, ethnic, and gender boundaries that limit labor's ability to become really a true mass movement.
And everything changes in 1886 because that's when we have the famous Haymarket riot in Chicago.
And this was a rally for the 8-hour workday, which we can all get behind, right?
yeah,
I
yeah.
love
Let's
an
go,
8-hour
let's go.
workday.
Bring it on.
How about a 6-hour workday?
Yeah, okay,
let's bring
go.
it down.
Let's go.
And unfortunately, though, in 1886, a bomb is going to be thrown into the crowd at this Haymarket rally. We now refer to it as a riot, but at the time it's a rally for the 8-hour workday. Police are going to be killed in this altercation, and chaos really ensues.
And the follow-up to this isn't going to be justice. It's going to be panic. 8 anarchists are tried. Evidence is thin. Several are executed anyway.
As one of the condemned declares during his trial, quote, "The time will come when our silence will be more powerful than the voices you strangle today."
And Haymarket is going to devastate the Knights of Labor because they're going to be associated with this violence. And like we said earlier, this is already something that many people were criticizing labor unions for. Even if it wasn't necessarily true, it was just something that people were attaching to unions. And so labor activism now, more than ever before, is going to be linked to violence and radicalism and foreign threats.
And the sympathy that you would have gotten from the public completely goes away. And as a result, employers are going to kind of tighten their grip on the whole industrial situation.
And after Haymarket, there comes a strike that's going to really define the limits of labor power during the Gilded Age.
And that's going to be in Pennsylvania at the Homestead strike in 1892, where steel workers are going to strike against Carnegie Steel.
Well done.
And the management for Carnegie Steel is going to hire the Pinkerton Detective Agency. So think of these as like private police, basically.
Sometimes border paramilitary.
Yeah.
They were pretty rough.
Very rough. And so violence is going to erupt. These Pinkerton, detectives or agents are going to try to force the steelworkers back onto the job. And the state militia is actually going to have to be called in to restore order against the workers.
Right. So Homestead is a mess. So, and then 2 years later, you have the Pullman strike will shut down rail traffic nationwide. The Pullman Company was a company that built luxury railroad sleeping cars. It was a pretty innovative idea, the kind meant to make long-distance train travel comfortable and respectable. And they were symbols of modern progress.
The thing was, though, the workers who made those cars, those luxury cars, they lived in a very different world. George Pullman built entire company towns on the outskirts of Chicago, and it's there where his workers rented company-owned homes, and they had to shop at company stores, and they had to pay company-controlled prices, and all of this came out of their paychecks.
And so when wages were cut, but rent prices weren't with those company-owned homes, workers they're not just protesting a job, but they are protesting an entire system that controlled their work and their housing and their daily lives. And this is a plot line on The Gilded Age on HBO that we were talking about last week.
Yep. It makes for a powerful moment because it's not just a workplace; it's an entire system, and really, it's a system of capitalism and unregulated capitalism. So the strike spreads, and railway workers across the country start to refuse to handle Pullman cars, and it turns a local labor dispute into a national economic crisis.
And this time, the federal government intervenes, sending troops, citing the need to keep the mail moving and interstate commerce functioning.
The Pullman strike also launches a national figure, right? Even though ultimately the Pullman strike is defeated by really the forces of capitalism uniting with the federal government, we also see a new national figure rise up, Eugene Debs. And at the time, he wasn't even really all that radical. He was just a union leader, and he thought, look, if we unionize, if we collectively bargain, we can negotiate fairly within this system.
What do you think his middle name was?
Do you know?
I don't know.
V.
Victor?
That's a good guess.
Eugene.
I want to go with Vesuvius.
Okay. Vandalia.
Let's see here. Victor! Oh,
Damn.
yeah.
Was it really?
You are the victor.
Oh, crushed.
Wow.
Well done.
All right, Eugene and I are on middle name status. So when the federal government sends troops in, and the reason they're going to do this, like you guys kind of mentioned this earlier, this American society has an interest in the railroads running. Like if the railroads aren't running, it's impacting the entire nation. So that's why the federal government assumes this power over private business. And so Debs is going to be jailed for defying a court injunction, and his faith in the ability to negotiate fairly within the system, it's going to collapse. And while he's in prison, that's really going to be his turning point.
Right. And Debs later would
Prison
say...
changed him.
Prison
Prison changed him.
That's where Victor went to Vesuvius.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
he could just...
Or just V.
He
could
could
just
just
blow
pop
up.
off.
Yeah.
like a volcano. Oh, volcano. Oh, there's so many good V words. Okay. So later he says that his time in prison will force him to confront a pretty hard truth, which is when labor and capital collide, the government doesn't stand neutral. It protects property and commerce first. So that realization pushes him toward socialism and turns him into one of the most influential critics of American capitalism in the early 20th century.
So why didn't labor succeed? It's really because when the dust settles after all of these events, Haymarket and the Pullman strike, most workers, they don't get what they were fighting for. There was no national 8-hour workday, no legal right to unionize, no job security, no unemployment insurance, and no meaningful workplace safety laws. And wages rose unevenly at best. Strikes were broken more than they were won, and employers retained control over everything: hiring, firing, and working conditions.
It's pretty
Speaking
depressing.
of,
Wah, wah, wah. That was
us.
me.
that was you?
That
I
was
thought
not
you would hit
the
a button.
sound box. Nope, that
Hey,
was me.
you know what? Speaking of labor, congratulations, Aunt Riley,
Oh,
Aunt Miss Kellner.
A different type of labor.
a different, yeah.
Let's,
I became an aunt for the third time
can
today.
we can we give a shout out to
Reese,
Baby Reese?
baby Reese, my
Love Baby
new
Reese.
niece.
Baby Reese.
Baby
Welcome to
Reese
the
is getting the
world.
big
Niece.
podcast shout out.
Yeah.
Yep, different sort of labor
So well done.
that thank
Yeah.
the heavens I didn't have to go through.
Well
Just
done.
get to reap the benefits of it.
Yeah, be the favorite aunt.
Yes.
So here's several reasons that you alluded to, Ms. Kellner. First, you got fragmentation. You got workers who were divided not just by skill, but by race, ethnicity, and gender.
And really, what makes this even more complicated is the arrival of a massive and diverse number of immigrants. And this constant labor supply is going to really weaken the bargaining power, because if you have just this massive surplus of workers, it's really easy to replace anyone who gets angry and tries to walk off the job.
And also, I would say immigrant workers who are maybe not very advanced with their English, so have a very difficult time understanding people who are trying to get them to unionize or their attempt to unionize on their own. So there's just a lot at play here. But the third one is going to be legal hostility, that the courts are going to routinely issue injunctions against strikes, ordering them to end.
And finally, the nail in the coffin here is state power. From militias to federal troops, government will government forces will consistently favor employers.
Right. And in the background of all of this is the explosion of American cities.
Called urbanization.
Urbanization.
So this is going to be driven by different things. Rural Americans are going to move into the cities looking for jobs. Millions of immigrants also arriving from Southern and Eastern Europe between, 1870 or 1880 to 1910. Over 20 million immigrants
number.
are going to come into the United States.
Right. And before, there was predominantly Northern and Western European. So the new immigration, as we will call it, Italians, Jews, Poles, Slavs, often poorer, often Catholic or Jewish, often viewed as not being able to assimilate into society.
Right. And that's really crucial. These were immigrants who didn't really look like they were part of the Anglo-Saxon, kind of white culture of America. They spoke in far different languages than the Germanic, or the Anglo-Saxon, and so they were not Protestant. So overwhelmingly, unlike earlier groups like the Germans and the Irish, these were groups who were seen as impossible to become part of that American identity. And what's the answer to all of this? Nativism, right? A new level of nativism, kind of a rebirth of what we saw in the 1840s with the Know-Nothings. But now they've got literacy tests, and there's these restriction movements, and really using these racialized fears to really drive home their point. They play out directly in workplaces and in housing, and these are points of contention that start to explode.
And then on the job, native-born workers born in the United States, they often see these newer immigrants as wage threats. that, while employers employers are going to exploit those divisions, and they're going to hire recent arrivals who, like we said, have a language barrier and are desperate. They're going to hire them at lower pay. They're going to use them as strike breakers, and they're going to pit these groups against one another. And ethnicity is going to become a fault line inside factories and mines.
Divide and conquer. That's page 1 of the management playbook right there. Wow, we sound like a herd of cows or something.
One of us grew up.
So good.
Yeah, one of us grew up around cows, and the other two didn't.
Whoa.
Oh my God, that was like so.
Can you do that
cow-like.
again? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is like
Yeah.
on point. Oh my God.
Papa used to run several hundred head of cattle back in the day.
Paw.
Okay, I'm working on
Okay.
it. Okay, and so, oh wow, that was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, I'm glad.
was.
Glad I could bring something to the table.
Yeah.
And in
For
cities, for once, in cities, those tensions followed people home from where they worked. Overcrowded neighborhoods will harden into ethnic enclaves, and not just by choice, but by discrimination. Landlords pack immigrants into unsafe tenements like sardines, while middle-class reformers and politicians blame immigrants themselves for the disease and crime and poverty that they have to withstand.
And this harsh reality was that for most urban residents, right? That life meant tenements. There were these overcrowded rooms where you would have multiple families living in one room, poor ventilation, unsafe water, constant exposure to disease. These weren't just bad buildings, but they're really the physical result of cities growing way faster than they should have, than things were able to keep up, like sanitation and building codes and things like that, and also faster than wages growing. So housing supply, public infrastructure, none of this is going to be in the space where it needs to be with this speed of urbanization.
So then enters Jacob Riis, the aforementioned, the quote that we began the podcast with. He will document this brutality in a book called How the Other Half Lives. And he's going to use photography. And this is really important because words sometimes can move people, but photographs are unmistakable. And so he's going to use photography and reporting to force middle-class Americans to confront conditions that they were so easy to ignore. So his goal is not just to shock, but to argue that poverty is a social problem. It is one that we all share and not just a personal failure.
In class, we made a point of continuity with the idea of Uncle Tom's Cabin, right? Taking these social issues to people who otherwise would not have had a high consciousness or awareness of them, and sort of putting it in their face and saying, you can't look away from this. You have to acknowledge it and be willing to do something about it.
That's a wonderful connection.
Yeah, thank you.
Kids were talking about it.
It was a wonderful connection.
Hopefully
No, it was.
your guys' students are listening to this podcast, so
they
can
can
do
learn
well on
something
their
from your
LOQ.
students,
Yeah.
obviously.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Were
Thank
you
for
doing
saying it.
a Kermit the Frog voice kind of? Was that what you were doing a second ago?
That's a wonderful point there, Mr. Garrison. No, not really
you see-
Kermit.
That's pretty good.
Rainbow Connection.
No, I said wonderful.
I know, but his song, The Rainbow Connection.
Oh.
The lovers, the dreamers, and me.
Okay.
Okay.
Speaking of Kermit the Frog, how
Yeah.
about the City Beautiful movement?
Exactly.
Dang.
That's where I was
That's
going
Kermit was beautiful.
next. So at the same time that as elites are kind of thinking about, well, our cities are super overcrowded, what could we do about it? This movement emerges called the City Beautiful movement. And the idea is, let's make cities a really beautiful place. We've got grand boulevards. Oh, there we go.
City beautiful.
That's the beautify.
Yeah, monumental architecture. Go ahead. Oh, I thought you were going to do it again.
No.
These wonderful civic spaces. And the idea was, if we make the city look nice and pretty and respectable, maybe that will force the working class to sort of step up their game.
And that's where the tension lies, that the City Beautiful reform, it's not meaningless because it does reshape public space. We were part of the City Beautiful movement with Forest Park.
Exactly. Yeah,
And-
Forest Park was one of the first great
Yep.
urban parks in
Central
America.
Park came after
Yeah.
Forest Park.
Forest Park was sort of like a trial run to see if it could be done. We
Yeah.
showed the rest of the country.
We showed them.
We sure did.
But
Now we play golf there.
yeah, but the City Beautiful reform, it prioritizes visual order and middle class comfort over structural fixes like affordable housing, sanitation, labor protections. So, in other words, cities are made to look modern faster, and they're made to work for the people living in them, but it's really just as a
It's like the Gilded Age.
place for middle class people to enjoy.
Yeah, it's like the Gilded Age, though, right? You're gilding cities. You're making them
Yes.
appear
Yeah.
beautiful. But underneath the surface, there's a lot of rot, a lot of...
I thought the city was pretty beautiful, Miss Piggy, but turns out that it wasn't.
yeah. Okay.
So-
yeah.
Into this chaos step the political machines.
Dun, dun, dun. That was me. Tammany Hall in New York. It's called Tammany Hall because that is where the ruling party had their headquarters, and they were led by Boss Tweed. And William Tweed was his name, but he was the boss. My first year teaching U.S. history was to freshmen, and I got them calling me Boss Tweed.
Okay.
When we covered Boss Tweed for the rest of the year, they called
You know
me
what?
Boss Tweed.
We call that respect.
Respect.
Although Boss Tweed,
That's right.
not a great upstanding citizen.
You know what, though?
Right. That's
Despite
true.
him being 300 pounds, he was surprisingly light on his feet. He was a great dancer.
Oh, wonderful.
So political bosses like Tweed are going to provide jobs and aid and favors in exchange for votes.
Yeah, and then they could use those votes to wield influence over politicians.
Mm-hmm.
And, this wasn't just New York, by the way. It was in every major city. For example, in St. Louis, there was a Democratic politic machine. Both parties had machines, by the way. But in St. Louis, there's a Democratic machine that dominated in the late 19th century. And what they really did is they kind of controlled saloons and used patronage, and they kind of made corporate alliances. And at the end of the day, they were able to sort of manipulate most of the financial part of the city. They were led by this guy, Ed Butler.
Ed Butler. Give me Butler on the phone. You know, Kansas City, where I'm from, it was the
Pendergast.
Pendergast. Yeah. And they
I've been there.
they
Yeah, I know.
basically got Truman elected.
Well, they
Yes.
kind of did.
Yeah.
They kind of did. So this guy Butler, his machine, he will rely on tight relationships with business leaders, as they mostly do, control over city contracts, loyalty networks rooted in immigrant neighborhoods. Like other machines, it thrives where city governments can't keep up, turning political loyalty into a form of social insurance.
So yeah, machines are corrupt, right? They're giving kickbacks to their friends who might run, a business. Let's say the courthouse needs new windows or something. They're also manipulating votes and striking backroom deals. This is not democratic, but they are functional, right? They are providing jobs. They're providing emergency aid to people who are down in their luck. Remember, there's no safety net at this point. We talked about the lack of workers' compensation earlier. These cities are growing faster than reform-minded institutions can handle. So in that way, the machines kind of step in.
Okay, so let's think about where this leaves us. We're at this pivotal moment where we had the rise of Gilded Age industrial capitalism, which creates a massive amount of wealth, but we're seeing that wealth is being concentrated in the hands of a few, and the working class is starting to have enough. They unionize, they start to push back, not with a ton of success, but it's become clear that something has to give, and this is going to point us in a new direction. So where are we headed next?
We're going to head to the turn of the century. We're going from the 1800s to the 1900s. And I think you guys should really think about all the problems that we've seen emerge during the Gilded Age that come from this new industrialization. We've never seen something like this. And with progress comes problems. Mo money, mo problems.
Mo
Well
money,
said.
mo
Well
problems.
said.
And so something is going to have to change. And these problems are so widespread that there's really only going to be one institution that is going to be able to do that.
And
Which one is that?
That is going to be the federal government.
The
Right.
government.
So we're going to finally have to address this question. What is the role of the federal government in the lives of individual Americans? And if enough Americans demand change, is the federal government going to respond? And we're going to talk about that progressive period in the next couple episodes.
Which I'm pretty sure is a
pretty good period of American history.
So
if
says
I
Kermit.
remember.
And that's the fundamental conflict that Americans still fight over today
That's
politically.
exactly right.
How active should our federal government be in people's everyday lives?
Exactly. Wherever you go, there you are.
There you are.
And that's why we're here. So thanks for tuning in. Did that make sense?
No,
That
it
goes,
didn't.
Okay.
Yes,
But we were
it
going to
does.
go with
I'm
it.
putting it on my car as a bumper
Okay,
sticker.
yeah. So thanks for tuning in to APUSH for All. If you like the episode, be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple iTunes, or YouTube. Leave us a review, send us a message, ask us a question on Instagram, but APUSH for All.
I check our DMs all the time. We never have.
Start
Anything.
sending us some
Yeah,
messages.
come on.
Even like, what would be great?
Let us know you're out there.
We've got a lot of former APUSHers,
Yeah.
you know?
Let us know how you are using your knowledge of American history. We'd love to
Yeah.
hear from you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So until next time, keep learning from yesterday to make sense of today.